Now, the Nigerian government is looking to optimize its asset holdings across the economy, but not looking to operate those assets. And that's according to the CEO of the Ministry of Finance Incorporated, Dr. Armstrong Takang. The head of the Specialized Investment Asset Management Company of the Nigerian government was speaking exclusively to Arise business anchor Rolake Akikobi-Fulani today at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Let's take a look.
The Ministry of Finance Incorporated was actually established in 1959. So it actually predates Nigeria's independence.
Okay.
But for over 63 years, it only existed as a non-operating entity. So even though a lot of the investments that the federal government made were made using MOFI. So it was actually set up to be the investment arm or the investment asset manager on behalf of the federal government of Nigeria. And that's why most of the assets that government had acquired over years, corporate assets, real estate assets, and other asset classes that federal government has an interest in, were held using MOFI as a legal entity to do so. But it really never acted as an operating entity. And as such, many of the shareholder rights and responsibilities that were expected of it over a lot of these investments were really not exercised. What ended up happening was that many of these investments really either became suboptimal in terms of their performance, and many of them became moribund. So clearly that is not the way to go. Global best practice requires that if you need to have an entity that acquires these investments, but has to be very active in terms of managing them, but not operating them.
Yes.
Because there's a difference between managing your shareholding and operating the businesses. This is specifically in terms of managing your shareholdings, expecting that there will be professionals that will be the operators of that business.
Yeah.
And so early part of last year, precisely last year, the new MOFI was launched, and a number of things were unique about the new MOFI. One is that the new MOFI now has a governance structure. At the very high level of that governance structure is the governing council that Mr. President chairs. Then below the governing council, it's the board of directors. As you know, recently the board was reconstituted, and the chairman of that board is Dr. Shamsuddin Usman, who is the former Minister of Finance, former Minister of Planning, as well as Deputy Governor of the CBN. And then, of course, there's the management. So governance is key for us. The second is really a clear mandate as to what the new MOFI is supposed to do. There are three key areas that, at the very high level, is supposed to be the trusted custodian of federal government investment assets, but also the active manager of those assets, not an operator, manager of government shareholding across the different asset classes. So that is really the focus of the new MOFI. But why is that important? It is important because at the moment the government has an economic agenda. At the heart of that economic agenda requires optimal management of our assets to ensure that we're getting maximum value from those assets, including dividend payments, to give us liquidity, as well as capital appreciation of those assets while they're being managed.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for that expose on MOFI and its structure. I think governance is very important.
Sure.
MOFI has, of course, recently been in the news quite a lot with regards to a very strategic sector in Nigeria, the power sector, and the mandate that was given to MOFI to manage the federal government's interest in the 11 discos. Can you tell us a bit about that move and how it might impact reforms or policy to come in the power sector?
So what needs to be clear is that, as you know, the power sector is very central. The President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has given a clear direction as to where we should go with respect to our economy, repositioning it under the Renewed Hope agenda.
Right.
One of those is really the fact that steps and policies and measures must be taken to double our GDP growth to about 7%, so that at least it is above our population growth. The second is to work towards ensuring that we grow our GDP base to $1 trillion. The third is to ensure that we're creating tens of millions of jobs for a lot of our young population. Now, all of these things are not likely to happen without addressing the challenges that we have with the power sector. The government has already taken steps to addressing that. The Minister of Power has been making some policies along those lines. The Minister of Finance and the Coordinating Minister of the Economy, along with the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, have set up a team under the Economic Coordinating Team to look at the issues around the power sector. So the issue about transfer of that is just part of a broader picture to say how do we address some of the structural issues within the power sector with the view to ensuring that we increase the number of hours that Nigerian homes, Nigerian businesses, Nigerian industries, as well as communities get light. And to do this, there are many players that are involved in that. It's not just a single player across the value chain from generation to transmission to distribution. So it has to be a bigger program to ensure that we address that. And whatever it is that is being done now is part of that bigger program to ensure that we address the challenges in the power sector to help us achieve our economic agenda.
Okay, thank you for that. So just, if I'm sort of thinking, reading the minds of Nigerians, one of the things that's often talked about in terms of government asset classes and physical assets, especially real estate. And if you look at across many of our cities, metropolises, you see those assets. And the question on many people's minds would be, what about divestment strategies that could help our funding sources as a nation, as a country? So to what extent will MOFI be involved in divestment discussions around either the federal government's share in some of these entities or outright divestment, if you like, across the different asset classes, across the different sectors of the economy that you have holdings in?
Sure. So let me get back. First of all, at the moment for MOFI, based on the mandate that has been given to us by the president, there are three key areas we're focused on. The first one is around our corporate assets. These are companies where government either owns them 100% or owns shares in those. The job we've been given is to make sure that we work with the operators of those entities as well as other stakeholders to ensure that we are professionally managing our shareholding in these entities, so that value will be created. And how will that value manifest itself? It will manifest itself in terms of capital appreciation of the shares, as well as giving us liquidity through dividend payments.
Okay.
It is very important that every time we own shares in a commercial entity, value must be created. So that is the first. The second is establishing a register of what government owns. Today, everybody knows what we owe, but we cannot say authoritatively what we own, how much of it we own, where it is located, what is the value. That is our second mandate. We need to establish a national assets register of federal government assets across the different asset classes. The third is mobilizing investment to be invested in even those assets as well as other priority sectors of the economy. And so before we start talking about how to optimize those assets, how to monetize the assets, how to financialize the assets, how to leverage on those assets, it is important that we establish our ownership structure, our rights in those, and authenticate our ownership of it and where they are located. And that's the process we're going through right now. And you're right, the idea is that we need to begin to leverage on our assets, whether we're leveraging them in terms of using them as contributions for bigger investments, or we're using them to attract investors. For instance, real estate. There's really no reason why we cannot use undeveloped land to attract developers to develop the land and begin to create value from that. That's an example of it. Or you can take an existing corporate entity and open up the shareholding of that and bring in more investors through either a merger or an acquisition and create a bigger pie and ensure that you're able to get that entity to do more than it was doing before. So there are different options that are available to us. Divestment, of course, is one of those options, but that decision will be made on a case-by-case basis. And the law specifies how such divestments will be carried out. And the different government agencies that will be responsible for that will be involved, depending upon the strategy of optimization that we settle on.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned leveraging some of the assets to attract investment. Are you looking at possibilities, given some of Nigeria's funding challenges, its debt challenges, to pledge federal government shares in some of these entities as sort of collateral for taking loans? Is that a possible strategy?
Well, I think that the Honorable Minister of Finance and the Coordinating Minister of the Economy has been very clear that we need to think outside the box. We need to become very creative and say, how do we use the assets that we own to mobilize investment capital? How do we use the assets we own to expand the resources that are available to us, particularly in terms of domestic resource mobilization? And so we are very clear in our mind that those assets are very valuable, but we need to do more with them. And there are different options available to us, including creation of securities and derivatives on the back of those assets, including unlocking liquidity using those assets, including mergers and acquisitions with other entities that we believe that a new entity creates more value for both shareholders, especially for governments.
Indeed. So essentially some creativity and innovation around structuring of transactions that could help Nigeria achieve its goals.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I want us to take a look at another issue. We're of course here in Davos. The minister, we spoke to him 2 days ago on Nigeria's agenda at Davos. In terms of some of the conversations that have been had here at Davos and Nigeria's engagement with the investor and international community, what would you say have been some of your wins in the last 2 days, or the conversations that you've had that give you cause for optimism around the strategy that MOFI is pursuing and Nigeria's economic plans as a whole?
Fantastic. You know, Davos is an incredible meeting point. We've talked about the need to mobilize a lot of investment capital. Many countries are also competing for the same resources and the same investment, and they're speaking to the same investors. Now, what we do know is that investors tend to congregate in different locations to have conversations about broader issues. They look at where their capital will be placed, and you want to be there when those conversations are taking place. Incidentally, Davos is one of the prime locations where you have a lot of decision makers, asset managers, fund managers, capital allocators meet here to chart a course as to the direction of travel, where they are likely to place their resources, where they're likely to make investments. And you need to be there when those conversations are had. You need to engage them. You need to understand what their priorities are. You need to understand what their thinking is. You're not going to do that sitting at home. You have to meet them where they are. And so that's one thing. Being in Davos has given us the opportunity of meeting a lot of them and really understanding what are their concerns, what do they expect from us to be able to allocate resources or capital in our neck of the wood. That's the first thing. The second we've also noticed is that there are quite a good number of them here who are already investing in Nigeria, and they are willing to do more. But the question is, what are our priorities? How does the macro look going forward? Because that would help them make investment decisions as to whether or not they should make more investments in Nigeria or start looking at other geographies. We're already having conversations with them on that. And then when you come out here, you see what others are doing, right? Your competitors, whether they're within the continent or outside the continent, those that are also looking for capital and investment, you see what they're doing. It helps you begin to understand where the world is going and how you would have to shape your own strategies to be a preferred destination for that capital. And I think these are some of the reasons why we're here. And we're very excited because we believe that, there's a lot that is being we're going to benefit from these conversations and begin to position ourselves where people see us as serious and that we understand the global architecture as far as investment mobilization is concerned.